Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this special program on the Message of Ramzan. I am Moulik Berkana, the Cultural Affairs Officer at the U.S. Consulate General in Chennai, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all to this program. This event is streaming live on Facebook, and I welcome all of the viewers out there who are following along with this program. We have two very special speakers here with us today, and we have with us Dr. Professor P.K. Abdul Rahiman and Rashid Ghazali, who's joining us from Kerala. So I welcome them. And I wanted to just say up front, this is a series of ongoing programs we have through the U.S. Consulate General, virtual programs. Of course, right now we're still in lockdown mode and it's hard to meet in person, but the consulate has a robust slate of virtual programs, and we're very happy to connect with you right now through this virtual program. I'm actually in the United States right now. It's about 6:30 in the morning, so I got up early for this program. Our two featured speakers are joining us from South India, and I'll go ahead and introduce them. Dr. Professor P.K. Abdul Rahiman currently heads the Justice Bashir Ahmad Saeed, or JBAS Center for Islamic Studies at the University of Madras. He specializes in contemporary Islamic thought, gender in Islam, and West Asian studies. His current research is focused on Islam in the public sphere, changing dynamics of religious discourse in South India. The JBAS Center aims to impart quality education and an objective understanding of Islam and Muslim societies, and to promote religious tolerance and pluralism. Professor Rahiman, welcome. Our second featured speaker is Rashid Ghazali, who's joining us from Kerala. He is an acclaimed management coach, a leadership trainer, spiritual psychologist, community organizer, a popular inspirational speaker, and I can attest to that. I've heard him speak during a visit to Kerala, and as well as being an educational and social entrepreneur. He is currently the executive director of Sign Institute of Social Leadership in Wayanad, Kerala. He is also the managing director and secretary of Nilgiri College of Arts and Science and chairman of Kaisan Edu Ventures. Rashid, I welcome you to this program. Thank you both for joining us today. I should note that both Professor Rahiman and Rashid are alumni of US government exchange programs. They both traveled to the United States on separate programs, but under a project we call the International Visitor Leadership Program. This is one of our flagship exchange programs. So both of them have direct experience of life in the United States. And I hope that during the course of our conversation, they'll be able to bring in some of their insights and their experience from having visited the United States. As I mentioned, I'm here on the East Coast. I'm about 8 miles west of Washington, DC. And to get us started, I wanted to give a bit of an American perspective on Ramzan, or Ramadan as it's often called here in the United States. And I have a presentation, a brief presentation that I'd like to share with you. And this is just a general overview of Islam in the United States. And after this brief presentation, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Rahiman and Rashid for further discussions. Like India, the United States is a very diverse culture. We have every religion represented here as part of our country. And there's certain legal protections that are built into our Constitution that guarantee certain rights to our citizens. And one of those very fundamental rights is the right to worship as we believe, and even the right not to worship. And even enshrined in our Constitution, among the first 10 amendments, which we call the Bill of Rights, we have the freedom of religious assembly. And that means basically each person has the right to practice the religion of their conscience, and as long as that right does not impose on others' rights. Okay, next slide. So diversity in America, religious diversity, also extends into the workplace. There's a concept called workplace adaptation, or making accommodations in the workplace for certain beliefs. For example, wearing certain articles of faith, certain clothing. There is accommodation for taking off time to commemorate or to celebrate religious holidays. There's time also for, that can be given, for example, in the Islamic context, for the daily prayer. So there are legal protections in the United States that allow people to practice their faith and for their faith to be respected at home as well as in public spheres like the workspace. Next slide. So as part of our diversity in the United States, we also have the concept of interfaith. And this is a very important part of American society, where we have people representing different faiths who get together and focus on a certain project. It might be feeding the homeless. It might be cleaning a local park. It might be volunteering to help out women who are in a shelter. And this is a great part of our American tradition, this tradition of volunteerism and convening people from across the religious spectrum to share a common aim in achieving common goals or common projects. Next slide, please. In the United States, there are an estimated 3 to 6 million Muslims. Most of these Muslims are immigrants, but there are also American citizens who have converted to Islam. About 2 million Muslims in the United States are affiliated with a specific mosque. 70% of polled American Muslims strongly agree that they should participate in the US political process. And almost half of the attendees at mosques are age 35 or younger. Next slide. Now, speaking about mosques, each state has at least one mosque. There are 50 states in the United States, and again, each one of these has at least one mosque. And we've seen the growth of mosques over time from under 1,000 back in the 90s to more than 2,000 today. And these mosques represent all different kinds of architectural styles. Next slide. As I mentioned, American Muslims come from a cross-section of American society. There are many student groups that are active on campuses of the United States, and they organize activities, including during Ramadan, for example, organizing iftars, fast breaking for Muslim students on campus. Next slide. There are also American Muslims in politics. A salient example is from the state of Minnesota, Congressman Keith Ellison, who was in office from 2007 to 2019. He's still in politics, but he's no longer a member of Congress. If you see that photo there, Mr. Ellison is being sworn into office on the Quran, which was in the library of our third president and our first Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson. So that's an interesting bit of history there. Next slide. This is the last slide. We also have Muslims who are part of our US military. And this is an example, again, of workplace accommodation where Muslims are able to pray in their place of work. So that concludes the presentation on my side. And, you know, I want to acknowledge also that this is a very unusual time for, I think, for everybody with this coronavirus 2019 circulating around. It's a time when our movement is restricted and our usual routines are upended. And I'd like to hear from our two speakers about how they're also coping during this time. Let's go ahead and start with Dr. Rahiman. Are you there, Dr. Rahiman?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Moulik, for having me on this program. I'm honored to be part of this virtual conversation on the Message of Ramzan, being organized by the U.S. Consul General, Chennai. I know that the U.S. Consulate, Chennai, has been hosting iftar in Chennai almost every year. And even in this context of this pandemic, where physical gathering is not possible, the Consulate has ensured the opportunity of the Ramadan gathering in the virtual format. And I sincerely appreciate this gesture of solidarity. Muslims around the globe are observing the holy month of Ramadan. And we are almost at the end of this 1 month of spiritual journey. As we all know, Ramadan is the 9th month of the lunar calendar, observed as the month of fasting, self-reflection, and repentance as a means to attain piety. This month commemorates the first revelation of the Holy Quran, and Muslims spend their day and night in prayers and recitation of the Quran. Fasting from dawn to dusk during the month of Ramadan is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, mandated for every Muslim, while those who are sick, pregnant, breastfeeding, or traveling are exempted with provisions of compensation, and that compensation is feeding the poor for each day of lost opportunity of fasting. This is aimed at developing higher level of God consciousness, purification of the self from all forms of evils, inculcate good qualities, and improve self-discipline and self-control. Fasting during the month of Ramadan is one of the ways of
I'm sorry to interrupt, Professor Rahiman. I believe your microphone is on mute. I'm not able to hear you. So could you please check your connection? There we go.
Oh. All right. Was it mute for long, or it just went to mute?
No, just maybe for 10 seconds or so.
All right.
You were talking about
fasting is named at developing higher levels of God consciousness, purification of the self from all forms of evil, inculcate good qualities, and improve self-discipline and self-control. Fasting during the month of Ramadan is one of the important ways of realizing Islamic spirituality. Spirituality is not about a set of religious rules and regulations or prohibitions and punishments. It is about the relationship one has with own self, and you master yourself in order to achieve the best in you. In Islam, this is achieved through one's connect with the God through the process of prayers and the consistent remembrance of God, the creator and the sustainer of the universe. Thus, Islamic spirituality aims to build a moral and ethical consciousness that connects one to the creator God and the fellow beings on earth. Islamic faith, Iman, connects a believer to the God as well as make him grounded in the reality of the social context in which one lives. Islam teaches that piety cannot be attained merely through the formal ritualisms. We can see the Quran condemning those who perform formal ritualism while denying the due to the poor and the needy. Quran says that prayer is our communication with God and a way to remember the God and the blessings that we are endowed with. When we are used to doing something as a routine, we often don't realize the value of it. We don't understand the blessings that we have been endowed with. And Islam requires that we realize these blessings, be it the food we eat, the water we drink, or the air we breathe, or any other privilege that we cherish. Fasting makes us break away from that routine and realize that the nature has bestowed so much blessing on us. And those who believe consider that these blessings in our nature are blessings showered on us by the God. We stop the routine way of living for realizing the spiritual way of living. The spiritual way of living transforms us and helps us flatten our ego and the arrogance that we as human beings are susceptible to. During the fasting, we stop drinking even when we are thirsty and we have water with us. We don't eat even when we are hungry and there is food. And we regulate our bodily temptations. This helps us have self-control and regulate our behavior for the betterment of the world. Fasting in Islam thus helps us realize the ethical self and the moral society it wants to create. I believe that fasting is also a reflection of freedom bestowed on humans because it is self-regulated. It is about the commitment one has to the faith. No one would know if I chose to eat or drink in the confines of my private spaces. But I refuse to eat or drink or do anything that violates the sanctity of my communion with the God, because I aspire to realize my communion with the God and celebrate my freedom, a freedom that no one can take away from me. The believers come closer to the God during the month of Ramadan, both spiritually and physically. This is attained through the process of integrating every human organ with the spiritual process. And as the Prophet said, that every human organ, one's eyes, hands, tongue, and every body parts ought to be part of this process. The Prophet taught that any acts of bitterness by others are to be responded in kindness by excusing oneself by saying that I am fasting. It does not help us attain piety, self-reflection, and transformation. Because every form of prayer in Islam aims at transforming human beings into better persons by inculcating values and ethics of compassion, simplicity, and kindness. It is a process meant to cleanse the inner self. From the beginning of Ramadan, Muslims seek forgiveness, divine mercy, and seek salvation and heaven. It is, if this prayer is made without any material considerations and only for achieving the divine grace, it helps one to become compassionate and kind. This process is meant to take human beings to that state of perfection that the God has intended. Formalistic observations of fasting will not help us realize the very purpose and objectives of it. Muslims believe that the idea of practicing compassion and kindness are much rewarded in this holy month, and they engage in various acts of charity. Those who are mandated can you hear me? Yeah. Those who are mandated to feed a poor for each fasting they exempted from fasting are mandated to feed the poor for each day as a fidya or compensation. The Quranic verse that mandated fasting for Muslims state that fasting is made mandatory for Muslims as it was for older generations and religious traditions. This also points to the Islamic perspective that positions itself as part of the larger religious continuum and endorsement of the pluralistic religious experiences in the history of humanity. The month of fasting is a month of family reunions and creating social networks and solidarity. Iftar events hosted by Muslims and peoples of other faiths have created interfaith solidarity and mutual respect. The Zakat al-Fitr, the mandatory distribution of food grains before the Eid prayer, marking the closure of this holy month, also points to the social commitment that Islam puts forth. Zakat al-Fitr is meant to ensure that nobody goes hungry without food on the day of Eid. The global context of the pandemic has limited the possibilities of social gatherings and prayer congregations. I hope and pray that we will tide over this crisis soon and be connected to each other in making this world a better place to live. And thank you very much for this opportunity. And I wish everyone, every viewer, the Eid Mubarak in advance. And I'm sure we will have further conversations to follow, and any queries and questions that and comments we have, we can discuss about that. Thank you.
Well, Professor Rahiman, thank you very much for those remarks. I really enjoyed, that was a very comprehensive overview of Ramzan, and I really liked how you talked about how during this month, the ordinary way of life is suspended to be able to focus on the spiritual. That's a really good insight. And you mentioned a chance to interact with our viewers, which is definitely the case. I would encourage anyone who has a question or a comment to please post those in the comment box on Facebook, and we'll try to get to your questions in a moment. Again, thank you, Professor Rahiman. Let's now turn to our second speaker, Rashid Ghazali. Rashid, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, Rashid, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving this kind of an opportunity to be a part of this great event that even though it's in a virtual world, so we've got an opportunity to share some insights of Ramadan and other spiritual elements, and that will be definitely a positive gathering that we always will be having some fruitful outcomes or takeaways after this program. So as mentioned in the introductory session by Moulik and the former talk by Dr. Rahman, I just wanted to shed light on certain ideas which can be added to this point and which will surely be giving some add-ons to the point which we were discussing here about Ramadan and the spiritual values of Ramadan. So as we all are aware, Ramadan is a kind of a positive time for every believer to plan his life, to empower his mind, to dedicate his thought, and to cleanse his body, mind, and thought and everything in a peculiar, a positive manner. So when we discuss about these things, so because the Ramadan and its important and the traditions and the ritualistic value of Ramadan and all those things Dr. Rahmanji has wonderfully mentioned here in the introductory remarks, I don't want to repeat the same thing, but I just wanted to add some insights which surely gives for every believer. When we follow or observe Ramadan and when we are fasting, there should be some positive takeaways in every human being or every believer. That when I talk about this, I would definitely quote Imam Ghazali, one of the non-philosopher and a scholar, and he was mentioning about the levels of fasting, levels of Ramadan fasting, how it will be. So it's an interesting philosophical explanation about the Ramadan, because for us fasting is common for everyone. But he tries to exemplify or explain the levels of Ramadan in three different ways. The number one, which he was mentioning, that is Sawmu Am. In Arabic, we say it Am. Am means it's common or general. Or the fasting of the lay people. That means everybody will be fasting from morning to the evening, from dawn to the sunset, without taking any food and drinks. And that's a kind of fasting which most of the people will be following in this holy Ramadan. So that is the first level of fasting that cannot be treated as the end result of Ramadan. But it's only the physical version of Ramadan, that people are not taking food from morning to the evening and they are on fasting. That's a kind of a basic frame of Ramadan. That's what Imam Ghazali Rahmatullahi Alayhi was giving as an insight about Sawm Am. So when we talk about the second category or the second level of Ramadan fasting, he says about Sawm Khas. That means the fasting of the elect, or the fasting of the special people, or the special fasting. How does it come? We are fasting not only in terms of our body, and we are not refraining from food and drinks, and we are keeping away from all those worldly pleasures. Apart from that, or along with that, we are ensuring our entire organs are becoming the part of this fasting. That means we are keeping away ourselves from all the negative things, all the unwanted deeds and actions, and we are refraining ourselves from all the negatives to the positive way, and cleansing our thought, body, mind, and action in such a peculiar way with the spiritual insight or the spiritual light. This is what the category of the second, that means Sawm Khas. So where the special fasting will be taking place. When we compare this both, the Sawm Am and Sawm Khas, that means the common fasting and the special fasting, or the fasting of the elect, we can definitely differentiate within the result of the fasting which people will be gaining after this Ramadan. So particularly speaking, the outcome of Ramadan, as rightly mentioned by Dr. Abdul Rahiman, so this is the time where everybody can share or enlighten his thoughts and action in such a way he is gaining a higher version of spiritual quality in his behavior, in his character, and in all his personality aspects. So this is what Sawm Khas creating. The Prophet ﷺ gives, there is no benefit in your fasting if you are not refraining from all these unwanted things. If your tongue is not fasting, if your ear and if your eye is not being a part of this fasting process, there is no result in this such kind of a physical or a peripheral practice which we are in. So 70% of the people are only getting this common fasting principle. But instead of that, the point which I wanted to focus much, we should seriously think of creating a habit of developing a spiritual element of fasting that is a kind of special fasting, or the fasting of elect Sawm Khas. Finally speaking, which may not be that common, and people will not be able to reach to that higher level, whereas the intimate people to the Almighty God, and those who are spending or submitting their life fully with the spiritual values, we may not be able to reach that level. That is being called as Sawm Khasil Hawas. That means the fasting of the elect of the elect. That means the peculiar fasting. They are away from all the worldly thoughts, and they're purely with the divine energy. So this is what we differentiate from the commonality of the fasting to the special feature of the fasting in every believer. Finally, coming to my conclusion, which I wanted to tell you, that it's a point to discuss, or it's a point to question ourselves. Are we fasting with the common fasting process, or are we developing ourselves or empowering our mind and thought? If yes, then the humanitarian values will be there. The month before Ramadan, the month after Ramadan will be totally different. But now what's happening, the month after Ramadan is worse than the month before Ramadan. How does it happen? People are not practicing the second level, the Sawm Khas, that means the special values of Ramadan. If you are purely focusing on these values, definitely the humanitarian aspects of Ramadan will flourish among the people, and we will become the best noble individuals, and the world will become the best place to live in. So this is what I wanted to add on to the points which you both were mentioning about Ramadan and its insights. Thank you again for organizing such a wonderful program under the auspicious leadership of US Consulate. Thank you.
Well, Rashid, thank you very much. And thanks for joining us from Kerala. We hope we have a lot of followers who are from throughout South India, maybe around India or around the world. I really liked your presentation, Rashid. I think that you helped us to go deeper into analyzing and understanding the deeper values of Ramzan and talking about the common versus the special fasting. And it's not just abstaining from food and drink during the daylight hours, but it's also abstaining probably from negative emotions or negative thought patterns, gossip, this kind of thing. So that's, we're moving into a deeper understanding and sort of the deeper, maybe we could say, benefits of the fasting process. So thank you very much, Rashid, for your presentation. I mentioned that we have the possibility to ask questions. Our audience can ask questions, and we have one question from Abdul Hasib, and I'd like both Professor Rahiman and Rashid to consider this question. Mr. Hasib is asking, how can we excel ourselves in lockdown and carry forward the values of Ramzan? So it's this issue of, and we had talked about this a few days ago when we met. We talked about how this is a very different Ramzan in terms of, at least my understanding, where a lot of Ramzan activities are communal. There's a group prayer, there's the night Taraweh prayer, there's, gathering for the fast breaking in larger groups. So I think his question is very pertinent to the contemporary situation. How are you commemorating Ramadan in a time of this lockdown?
I think Brother Rahim is talking, please. Yeah, please. Am I supposed to share?
Rashid, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think the question is, as you said, it's quite interesting because it's very much relevant in the present context. People are highly worried because the Ramadan and lockdown came together, and we all are stuck at home. Normally, as rightly mentioned by Dr. Rahim, that we were having many celebrations and gatherings, iftars, and meeting places in mosque and many other places during this Ramadan. This Ramadan, everybody is stuck at home. No difference from any of the country, even US. From your country to from our places, everywhere the people are stuck at home. So what I personally wanted to share to this question, it's a high time to rethink about connecting our rituals and connecting our spiritual feast to an occasion, to a place, to a context, to a situation. Because spirituality, away from all those situations, even if you are locked at cave, you have a lot to do in spirituality. The problem which we were facing from many years, as part of the institutionalization of religion, we were connecting the religious things to a place or a certain situation. But I firmly believe spirituality, especially Ramadan, Allah says, when he speak about Ramadan, it's for me. I am rewarding for this fasting because it is purely a spiritual connectivity between the Almighty God and the people. So if that is the case, then the believer has, though the lockdown tensions are there, the spirituality of Ramadan will surely lie in our heart. And I believe, if you ask me, we are getting many insightful moments in Ramadan with family to sharpen our thought and to enlighten our ideas and Islamic beliefs, so that it will be another model of Ramadan to create some positive values and noble values within the family and within ourselves.
Yeah, I quite agree with Rashid on this perspective that spirituality is not occasion specific. It is reflective of the totality of human life, and irrespective of what context we are in, the spiritual explorations of and experiences of human beings do, go on to its deeper possibilities. And I do agree that Ramadan, the month of Ramadan, has many social component in terms of the observance of the fasting. The experiences are mostly communal in terms of the rituals, prayer congregations in the mosque, or iftar gatherings, or people gathering to, support the community for services and all that. But, if you look at the way people today are coping with this lockdown situation is that there was, call to convert the homes into mosques. Let us make our homes the place of worship, that people do their prayer from morning till late night. All prayers are, carried out in the homes, which brings in a greater deal of, family solidarity, commitment to the family. The bonding within the family is strengthened much more. In a context where people had this crazy schedules of life, where nobody had time for anyone, this has also opened up a new opportunity, and I see it as an opportunity to be with children, family, elders in the family, all that. So that is it's a possibility that I see. And another thing is that, there are also people in urban settings thinking about employing modern technologies, integrating technologies into the performance of their rituals and all that. Now, every Friday morning, you have some Jummah khutbah. It's not Jummah khutbah, but you have somebody delivering a bayan or a sermon and circulating it on the electronic media. And people who otherwise did not have any opportunity of using technological devices for the enhancement of their spiritual experiences are now, slowly switching to these newer modes of, exploring the technological options. So I think humanity, as we always say that, our necessities would force us to innovate and invent, and the spiritual domain is also not an exception in this regard, is what I think.
Okay, thank you, Professor Rahiman. Those are good thoughts. We do have some questions coming in. Here's a question back to Rashid. Rashid, this is a question for you from Basim Ghazali. How can a layman scale up from the level of fasting from the common man to the level of fasting of the elect? And then you mentioned the elect of the elect. So Rashid, you were talking about different scales of fasting, and this viewer is asking for practical advice about scaling up. So over to you, Rashid.
Thank you very much. And it's quite complicated question that because when it comes to the fasting to the lay people, it's quite common. Anybody can observe, anybody can follow it. But when it's come to the elect, it's a little bit experiential, because people have to really focus on their personal values and eliminating the negatives in his life and engaging all the entire organs, limbs, and the organs of the body. Then automatically the limbs and senses of his life engaging in the fasting process. Finally, coming to the elect, so it's the higher stage where a person will be achieving its zenith of spiritual growth, but it may even take time. But I think it would be great if that questioner will be reflecting himself from the fasting of lay people, try to connect to the second stage, that means fasting of the special people, and gradually and spiritually, when we get elevated, and normally with the noble values which we are following in, automatically we will be reaching to the higher level. If you ask me the percentage of the people's achievement, the 70% or the 60 to 70% of the people will be laying with the first category, and 20 or 30% will be in the second category. Only 10 or less than 10% will be in the history, who will be coming under the category of the elect of the elect. Purely it's experiential and purely it is spiritual. But there is a quote, Prophet ﷺ says, one who reaches to that level, then the Allah will say that your eye will be mine, your ear will be mine, your body will be mine. If you walk, I will run to you. And if you are trying to be closer with me, I'll try to hold you with me. So this kind of a unity, or this kind of a oneness with the Almighty and the Creator will definitely arise at the highest stage. Let's try at least to make from commonality to the speciality of Ramadan at least with some noble values. That would be the way, or the best possible way in today's world.
Okay, thank you, Rashid, for that very informed answer. I would remind our viewers that we appreciate this interactive program. We hope you're enjoying this program that we're streaming live on Facebook. And actually, we have a questionnaire that we'll be posting soon, or that perhaps is already posted. And we would welcome your feedback on this program and other programs. So if you see a link to a questionnaire, please go ahead and fill that out. We have a few more questions. I'll direct the next question back to Professor Rahiman. Ramadan is not just about fasting. It's also significantly about the Quran. And we have a question here about tradition of itikaf, staying in the masjid or the mosque during Ramadan, but that's not possible at this time. So is there a solution for taking the place of some of the traditions like the itikaf that people are not able to practice by going to the mosque? So I presume they would practice at home. Professor Rahiman, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we are in an extraordinary situation, and extraordinary situation demands extraordinary measures too. I think we are altering many practices right from the holiest places of Islamic worship and every other, small mosque in every nook and corner of the world are being closed. And in such a scenario, I think it's very important for us to give priority to follow the physical distancing, not the social distance. I would rather prefer the word physical distancing. And, ensuring that everybody remains safe. But the idea of i'tikaf, what is it all about? What is the purpose of i'tikaf? While we do that inside the confines of the mosque normally in ordinary situations, the idea is to relate ourselves to the God better, to be away from all other material distraction that we might have, and then connect ourselves to the Divine Almighty. And when we have converted our mosques into, our homes into mosques, and homes are vibrant with, recitation of Quran and the prayers and all that, I'm sure, if not, the same way that we do i'tikaf, we can try and connect to the divine from the confines of our homes. And that I don't see any other options as of now left with us in the constraints of the pandemic.
Yeah, Professor Rahiman, that's practical advice. I think that a lot of the events that would normally be commemorated or celebrated in a public space inevitably have to shift to the domestic sphere. So whether it's the 27th night or the itikaf or other activities, I think all of those are shifting to the home now. I mentioned at the top of my remarks that both of you had the opportunity to go to the United States on an exchange program sponsored by the US government. And I wanted to hear from both of you. Maybe we'll start with Professor Rahiman. I want to hear from both you as well as Rashid about your experience in the United States, and if you could draw any parallels or differences between your experience in the United States and in India, with perhaps specific reference to the Islamic community or community leaders or Ramzan. So Professor Rahiman, let's go to you first and then to Rashid to talk about your experience in the US and drawing parallels. Professor Rahiman, your mic is on mute, please. Unmute yourself. There you go. Okay.
Yeah, it is a good coincidence that my visit to the United States happened to be during the month of Ramadan. Though it was not a program focused on the Islamic community, it was a program on gender studies in the US, and my programs are mostly organized in the university departments and think tanks in different parts of the US. But one interesting visit that I had was to an organization called Al Karama, headed by Aziza Al Hibri, a legal scholar in the United States, who runs this organization for Muslim women lawyers in the United States. And there were multinational Muslim women in the organization when I visited them. And Professor Aziza came and said, Ramadan Kareem, and we are all fasting. We are sorry that we can't offer you anything, any recreation or any refreshments. And that multinational gathering of Muslim women was a very fascinating experience. Most of them fasting and some not, and the way they interacted with me and that information that I gathered from that interaction was that their day-to-day life in the United States is much more freer than the experiences that they have had in some of their home countries. Not everybody, but some of them who came from conflict zones in pursuit of their education into the United States. And I think that there are common elements when it comes to the experiences of Muslims in America and in India. We assume that both being countries with values of pluralism and multi-faith experiences, both these countries do offer us this freedom to follow our tradition in a meaningful way, though there are aberrations that we see in the contemporary world. So that apart, we believe that free societies will allow and have opportunities for everyone to stick to their convictions and practice them in a peaceful manner.
Okay, very good. Let's go to Rashid. Rashid, could you please talk about your experience in the United States and maybe draw some parallels or comparisons with India?
I think I'll be the person after visiting last July in United States of America, the one who repeatedly shared about the experiences which I had in United States, because my session or the IVLP outcome was nowhere related to spirituality or religion or any other aspects, because it was countering violence and terrorism and the role of youth and so on. But the experience which I gained, or which pulled me in an excellent manner, that's the way how people are respecting each other, as you rightly mentioned in the first slide, because you were sharing about the principle of coexistence and the respecting each other in whatever may be the religion, whatever may be their philosophy. But the people, they love to coexist with mutual respect. So that the impression which I had before visiting United States, it was totally different, to be frank. But when I came and interacted with the people there, it was truly amazing and eye-opener for me. Let me quote only two things, because for keeping justice with your question. Because the first Friday in Washington, D.C., one of the official took me to one mosque to drop me there for attending the Friday congregation, as I have already intimated that I need facility to attend Friday congregation. They arranged me well in advance, and they just dropped me in front of a church. Then I asked, I'm a Muslim, I want to go for a Jummah prayer, I don't want to go to a church. Then he told me, sir, you go inside, you will see some surprise. Then I told, I don't have time to see the surprise, because it is almost near to Jummah. I just wanted to go to an Islamic mosque. Then he told me that, believe me, you go inside. When I get inside, I have seen it. It's a fascinating scene. 200 plus people gathered inside a church, and they are praying Jummah, and the Imam is delivering khutbah. And tremendously, the topic which he was delivering that day, it was the difference between Christianity and Islam. Inside a church, and that too in a rental space, a Muslim congregational prayer, the Imam is delivering a message, the difference between Christianity and Islam. It was really a shocking surprise for me, because how that become possible? Because in our, we believe we are truly cultural, multicultural, we are truly secular in many of our activities. But here, the highest aspect which happens, an Imam and a Swami and a father will be on a stage. That's the symbol of coexistence here. But instead of that, when the churches and synagogues are open, I have seen in Boston the same thing, I have seen in many other places, and I have got an opportunity to lead Friday Jummah as the Khatib in the Las Vegas Islamic Center. You have shown that photo here. So I led one Jummah prayer there as a Khatib. It was actually an interesting experience for me, because the Muslims in America is the best model. Even during this Ramadan, I got an opportunity to interact with Muslim Association in America about Ramadan. I also shared the same, because about the Sawm Khas and elevating the humanitarian values in the light of spirituality, you can take Muslims in America as an example, as the best example I have ever seen. Muhammad Ali Clay, and there are many more living examples which we can say the best human being in the 21st century. They lived in America and they proved. And Kentucky, the land itself gives the fragrance of such a human being can live in 21st century. I have ever witnessed. It was the fantastic experience I had in United States.
Oh, well, thank you, Rashid. That's great to hear. Speaking of the United States, I was just doing some research online last night, and the days here, because of the geographic location, the days for fasting are quite long. For example, here in the Washington, D.C. area, the sunset, the Maghrib is at 8:19 p.m. So that means a day of fasting more than 16 hours. And there's been a few questions about how American Muslims are commemorating Ramzan, this Ramzan. I think very similar to around the world, whether it's in India or Indonesia or the United States or Saudi Arabia. I think Muslims are spending a lot more time at home. We're seeing a lot more concern about human suffering. People are very concerned about the plight of the poor, people who may have lost their jobs or be in extra suffering at this time. There was an example recently too about a food cart in New York giving halal food for the fast breaking up there in New York. So these are some of the traditions that I've been hearing about here in the United States about how Muslims are commemorating Ramadan. Well, we just have a few minutes left. As I said, we are getting quite a few questions about poverty, or remembering that Ramzan is not just about fasting, but there's the tradition of reading the Quran, extra prayers. And let me go back to Professor Rahiman, maybe for some concluding ideas, some concluding remarks, maybe any tips for our followers. There's a lot of people who are asking, for example, about they're not able to give charity this Ramzan because perhaps they're not able to move freely about. So how can they still fulfill that obligation of supporting charity during this time? So perhaps Professor Rahiman, you could fold those into your concluding remarks, and then we'll come back to Rashid for a wrap up.
I think in terms of giving charity, there are multiple opportunities available to everyone from around the globe. But I would rather suggest a much more localized strategies to help people who are in need of support, financial support in and around the community. I think Islam insists that the local community take care of the financial and material needs of the marginalized, and it is understood that the God will hold responsible for the Islamic society if anyone goes without food, someone goes without hungry without food, or someone dies of want of medical care. So it is important that we as Muslims organize our resources to help people locally and help them survive the present crisis that all of us are trapped in. I think Ramadan is a great opportunity. It has always been a great opportunity for people to show the best of the qualities that they have. And I believe that despite the constraints that we are located in today, we can help the humanity at large in terms of the financial aids and other support systems that the society requires at this moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor Rahiman. Those are inspiring remarks, and I think it's probably seeing the situation about as positively as we can. And I like what you said about working locally, helping the local conditions. Let's go now to Rashid for his concluding remarks. Yeah, Rashid, over to you.
While concluding my remarks, I have seen plenty of questions connected to my talk and mentioning my name and about to answer, but we have running short of time. I just wanted to add finally with three aspects which definitely will create some positive insights to the many of the questions which already created. So during these COVID tensions and lockdown situations and COVID issues which we are facing now, if you are really experienced the Ramadan of the second level, that means the Ramadan of the special people with noble values. So we have experienced in this Ramadan, particularly these three aspects. Number one, financial contentment. That means in Arabic, it used to say qana'at. We will be happy with whatever the Almighty has given to us. So make it a habit from this Ramadan to keep it always, not only in the COVID days, but in all of your life. So contentment will make you rich. The richness is not with the plentiness of money. Richness is with the element of contentment. If you are really content with what you have, definitely you will be the richest person in the world. And the second thing, as rightly mentioned by Dr. Rahman, continuous charity and empathetic service. Charity no way connected to with any of your situations, whether you are happy, whether you are unhappy, whether you are in a problematic situation, whether you are in a happiest situation, whether you are rich or poor, doesn't make any difference. You extend a habit of doing or contributing something to the people, that definitely will create as-sadaqatu raddul balaya. Whatever the problems which you face in your life, that will get eliminated if you are practicing the habit of doing something. I have seen in the United States, even after dining in the hotel, we used to give that tip as a model. It's not as out of the compulsion, but it's full of happiness. People are doing this kind of charity. I have seen trust shop. I have seen many examples where the charity is being taken as a humanitarian cause without any much publicity or any other things. So sadaqah should be, or charity should be, the personal habit in all especially in the stressful situations where that will be very much relevant to continue such kind of a positive habits. Finally, coming to the point which we wanted to create, to be in the category of elect, we have to say no to nonsense. Ijtinabu nawahi. Whatever the things which is not good for us doesn't have any relation with any religion. It's humanitarian. It's humanistic. Whatever the things which is not good for me, not good for anyone else, please saying no to nonsense. So whatever the things which you feel, that ma yaribu ila ma la yaribu. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that's the basic thing which we have to learn from Ramadan. Whatever the things which is not good for you, please keep away from that. And finally, the last one which I wanted to tell, if that is the case, try the final message which I want to shed light. Please create the habits which Ramadan was creating in us. Unconditional love. Al-hubbu fillah. That means love, spread the love. You never restrict your love in terms of religion, in terms of any other barriers. Please keep it always open for everyone. Finally, attitude of gratitude, shukr, and forgiveness. Forgive the people, then only you expect forgiveness from Almighty God. Now what's happening, people are not forgiving each other and they're expecting the Almighty will forgive them. I firmly believe it won't happen. You show mercy and forgiveness to the people around you, then only you expect the Almighty will be giving that kind of mercy and forgiveness to you. Thank you very much for this great opportunity, and happy to be associated with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rashid. Thank you, Professor Rahiman. This concludes our 1-hour program. I hope this was very interesting to our listeners. I would encourage you to fill out the survey and please join us for our next virtual program. We'll go ahead and sign off with a Eid Mubarak. And once again, I thank our guests today, Professor Rahiman and Rashid Ghazali, joining us. Thanks, everybody.